There are several updates in the story on the anti-fascist man who attacked the ICE facility just yesterday. For those that aren't familiar with the story, I did a segment on this first thing at youtube.com/timcastnews, but I am going to go over the gist of the story, not as in great detail, because I want to update you on what's being said now, the response from anarchists, Antifa, and some information that I found that may actually show potentially what a motive may have actually been. Now, according to a document released, tweeted out by journalist Jake Hanrahan, which many people are calling a manifesto or goodbye letter, it's a direct call to arms. This is a man who threw fire bombs at an ICE facility, was armed, was explaining how he had a ghost AR-15, and was calling on other people to step up and do the same. And this is probably the most dramatic escalation in whatever you want to call the culture war that we've seen just yet. Now, I've talked about dramatic escalation in the past, street violence, but it was only a couple weeks ago, I believe, that Andy No was brutally beaten in the streets. And here we are, following a rally against ICE, calling for the dissolution of ICE and the liberation of the people detained. A man showed up with firebombs and a gun, and he lobbed them, burning a car, trying to light propane tanks on fire at the building, and police shot and killed this man. I'll go over a little bit of the gist of the story here, but I've got statements and more evidence. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, and a physical address. But of course, the most important thing you can do is share this video. I assure you it will be deranked. It's going to be demonetized. I am talking about sensitive issues. I get it. Nothing I can do about it, but YouTube is going to rule it not suitable for audiences, which means if you think this information is important, you need to share this. And I can assure you, finding this story, it's not running front page, front and center on any of these mainstream news outlets. For the most part, you're not going to find. You got to do a little digging. And it's kind of shocking. Imagine what the news cycle would be if this person was a right-wing individual. It would be everywhere. Right now, the media is kind of being dominated by Trump, who put out insensitive tweets, to say the least. That's the news. I'll cover that in the next segment, but we need to talk about this and how people are calling for more action. I want to say one thing as we're entering this. It was only 2 weeks ago that Vox put out a story saying the left, this op-ed that essentially says the left needs to take up arms to protect marginalized communities. What did we then see? Exactly that. So I'll read just a little bit here from the Washington Post to give you some context. Armed man throwing incendiary devices at ICE detention center killed an officer involved shooting, police say. They say at 4 a.m., 69-year-old Willem Van Spronsen threw lit objects at buildings and at cars in a parking lot, causing a vehicle to go up in flames. Court records show the man was arrested last year at a protest at the privately owned detention center, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement called the man an anti-immigration enforcement protester. At this point, we're going to say it, he's not a protester. He's a terrorist. That he was threatening the lives of everyone. If the detention center went up in flames, there's innocent people, not law enforcement, like people who are actually detained who could have been hurt by this. This was reckless and dangerous, and calling for more is only going to make things worse. They say the man, a Vashon Island resident, died at the scene after shots were fired. This could have resulted in the mass murder of staff and detainees. How's the facility had he been successful at setting the tank ablaze? So right away, I want to stress, it didn't seem like he had any regard for the people detained in these facilities, even though his letter would claim otherwise. The actions he took could have resulted in the death of these detained migrants. But let's move on now, because you can get the bigger context in my earlier video. Go to youtube.com/timcastnews. It's the 10 a.m. video. But here we have a statement published by Puget Sound anarchists. They say that they are the fire that will melt the ice and to rest in power. Taking this photo, fire to prisons, rest in power, and to stop deportation and end incarceration. I'm not going to read this for the most part. I will not. I do not need to read their pro-war, pro-violence, pro-death statements. These people are unhinged, dangerous, violent extremists, and I don't need to spread their message. I just need to give you the important context. That is, they are praising this and calling for more. They say that they are grief-stricken, inspired, and enraged by what occurred. They say that they only have the police statement, which they don't necessarily believe. They say that the facilities must be destroyed and the prisoners must be freed. They said, "We do not need heroes, only friends and comrades. Will was simply a human being, and we wish that he was still with us. It's doubtless that the cops and the media will attempt to paint him as some sort of monster, but in reality, he was a comrade who fought for many years for what he believed in, and this morning he was killed doing what he loved, threatening the lives of detained migrants and law enforcement agents." It's important to note, ICE enforces the laws set forth by Congress. It is a complicated system and by no means a perfect one. Just because something is law doesn't mean it's just. And I can certainly understand wanting to improve the situation in these centers. And I personally am very much opposed to private detention centers. I do not believe we should be in the business of allowing market incentives to determine how the law is being upheld and how people are being detained. But I would certainly never suggest such an action, such violent and dangerous actions be taken, as they could result in the loss of life for those who are simply enforcing what Congress tells them to do. That includes Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, etc. These people in Congress are the ones who are putting these laws in place, and ICE enforces them. If the Democrats won't vote on a bill to fix the situation, then what can we do? It's their fault too. It's simple to point fingers and claim one side is evil, but it's not how it works. And the solutions aren't simple, but I tell you this, the best path forward it's going to involve suffering, and that's unfortunate. But I tell you what, firebombing ICE can result in way more immediate harm and danger and threats and can escalate the conflict and make everything worse. These people are dangerous. But you get it. They straight up say numerous times in this that they are inspired by what he has done, ending by saying "rest in power" from the back of a truck. They say, that was the sticker on his car. We've seen other tweets going viral. Twitter allows this. Rip to anarchist fighter Willem Van Spronsen, they say. They called it proportionate action against enslavers and internment camp operators. Twitter allows this. They took down all the Proud Boys, but Twitter allows this. Let's move on to the note put forward. My understanding is by Van Spronsen. Jake Hanrahan, a journalist and filmmaker, tweets, "These are a few pages from Willem Van Spronsen's goodbye letter. He wrote this before attacking the ICE facility. Some are calling it a manifesto." I'm not going to read this in its entirety, just pointing out important bits of context. He cites Don Pritz, John Brown, and Emma Goldman. And as you know, if you watched my earlier video, Jake Hanrahan points out that it looks like Willem Van Spronsen was also a member of Antifa's, the anti-fascist John Brown Gun Club of Puget Sound. Here's him from their Facebook page. We can see there's a photo. Now, a bit of important, actually, let's do this. Before I get into the motivations, I believe his motivations may not have been political, although he definitely took a political action. Many people believe this was an intentional suicide, but let's check out some of this letter. The important bits are that he is saying, 1, the government is fascist, and Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Bill Gates, Betsy DeVos, George Soros, Donald Trump are the benefactors of the fascist system. He says he's a joyful revolutionary. He knows that his time is up. He goes on to talk about, he says he's calling on patriots to stand against the travesty, travesty against everything that you hold sacred. I know that in your hearts you see the dishonor in these camps. It's time for you to stand up to the money pulling the strings of every puppet pretending to represent us. He then highlights they are for-profit concentration camps. Well, I think it's fair to point that out. I am absolutely opposed to for-profit prisons and detention centers. What he did was absolutely wrong. The first line in the letter is, "It's time to take action against the forces of evil." He directly calls out Proud Boys, saying that maybe this is on the second page where he says police, migra, Proud Boys, the boss, etc. And it was this paragraph here where he says it's a call to patriots to stand up to stop them. And then he goes on to say that he disassociated from other organizations because of the choice of tactics. He used a ghost AR-15 unregistered. He made it himself, home built. Your laws did nothing. The gun laws did nothing. He says keep the faith, etc. Now, I found something interesting that I believe may shine some light on his possible motivations. In the initial reporting, we had a statement. Let me see if I can find it. Deb Bartley, who said she was a longtime friend of Van Spronsen's, told the Seattle Times that she believes he attacked the detention center on Saturday intending to die. He was ready to end it. I think this was a suicide. But then he was able to kind of do it in a way that spoke to his political beliefs. And this is where I believe it actually gets very scary. This man is putting forth a call to action to get people to go and commit violent acts which can result in loss of life of everyone, even the innocent. Look, I have very little respect for somebody who would uphold an unjust law. But I am at the arbiter of morality and don't know where the line is. But what I can tell you is vigilante justice and threatening the lives of the actual migrants does nothing. That's what this man did. The people detained could have been hurt. Thank God he was stopped. But I found this. It wasn't very hard, actually. It's an Indiegogo, legal defense for Will Van Spronsen. Ariel Van Spronsen writes, Will is currently legally unable to spend more than 4 hours per week with Boots. Please help him to afford an attorney so that he can be properly defended. They say in March of this year, my dad's wife, Shelley, left him and accused him of domestic violence. I can't imagine what prompted Shelley to take such dramatic action, but Will has never ever been threatening or violent in the entire time I've been alive. Now, I can't say whether he was or wasn't violent. He was accused by his wife, according to this Indiegogo, of domestic violence. He was not able to see his son. Now, I'm being told it has been confirmed by multiple sources that this is, in fact, the same man who lives in Seattle. I was able to verify some of the details myself and believe that this is true. That what really may have happened, a contributing factor to his suicide by cop, was that he was separated from his son. Now, I don't know where this went from there, right? It wasn't ever completed, but it was a flexible goal, meaning I believe they got the money. I don't know when this campaign is from necessarily, so I don't know where he was at with his son. But this is a potential motivation for his behavior. While it is fair to point out his letter is strictly political, it's a call to Antifa. He says he's Antifa, straight up in it. He talks about growing up in the post-war world and vowing to himself the whole time he would never allow concentration camps. I've got to say, there is blame to go around here. And I'm not one to normally do this. But he said he wouldn't stand by as concentration camps formed. These are not concentration camps. They are not concentration camps. The people who are coming to this country know full well the circumstances. They're coming from far off lands. They're coming from Africa. These are legal detention centers similar to a jail or a prison. I understand if you want to make the argument they're a concentration camp, fine, do it, but then you have to explain to me how a prison is not, how a jail is not, and how you overlooked the prison system and never took action against them. Listen, the prison systems we have in these countries are detestable. I find private prisons completely detestable, and I believe we should do away with them. It's why I'm a big fan of Tulsi Gabbard, who says, plain and simple, we have to get rid of them. She wants to end the war on drugs. She wants to end private prisons, end the wars, defend free speech, fight big tech. I like her, what she's doing. And she is not a radical. Unfortunately, there are people who refuse to listen to those who would be reformist. It can be done. What this man is doing and what Twitter allows, when Twitter allows this kind of stuff to propagate direct calls for terror, it is nightmarish. Look, Twitter has tried to take down the Middle Eastern terror types, the fringe far rights, but they've taken down the Proud Boys, but not Antifa. And we've known Antifa has been a problem for years now. They have been rallying. They fly a banner. They have a symbol. They show up together. They recently beat a gay journalist viciously in the streets. And Twitter does nothing to stop these groups. Nothing. As they cheer this on. And now here's what we get. A man with firebombs. I ask you, where will it go from here? But in talking about blame, this is what I highlighted earlier. Vox, the New Republic, mainstream, NBC is funded by NBC. Vox News is funded by NBC to the tune of $200 million. And they may have money from other places. And they run an op-ed saying, I'm a left-wing anarchist. Guns aren't just for right-wingers. Calling for people to take up arms. I ask you, where does it go from here? And it's simple. Take a look at these stories I have. Explosives found outside Eugene police station. This was back in January after a man showed up and he had a gun and he pulled it out on the cops, and the cops had to shoot and kill him. Vox running this story saying that's, people should buy guns. And then we have this story from the Daily Caller just the other day, multiple fake bomb threats. We have the fake bomb threats. We have violence in the streets, the beating. Andy Ngo is a moderate by any basic standard. He is. And they call him a fascist, and they beat him in the streets. And we have people in media justifying this. When Vox can run a story saying, go get your guns, and then 2 weeks later a guy shows up and actually tries to use it, what do we have? Look, I think there's blame to go around on the right, especially when they don't call out when you see right-wing extremism. A guy sent a bunch of fake bombs to a bunch of high-profile personalities, and while we did see condemnation, it's fair to point out that people are making a bigger case from this out of what he did. But there is a difference, and I will say this. The difference being that this was a legitimate terror attack with weapons. Not saying the MAGA bomber guy wasn't legitimate. It was meant to be terrorism. It was sending fake bombs to people. But this was a direct, the intention here was a step up. I guess that what I want to say is, here's what I see. When some fringe right-winger does something, of course conservatives call it out. The left then blames everyone, even moderates, for it. They say, oh, you're enabling it. When Andy Ngo was attacked and brutally beaten, we had people in the New York Times defending it, saying, well, violence is bad, but, they said. They defended it. When it comes to left-wing extremism, we don't see it. We don't see it on the front page of Vox. They'll talk about how the left should get their guns, but their front page doesn't have the story. They talk about ICE raids. They don't talk about a guy who literally just died showing up with Molotovs. I believe it was Molotov. I could be wrong, but fire bombs. Maybe they have written about it. I'm scrolling down and I see Stuber, I see progressives, I see them ragging on Trump. I guess not. So Vox can write a story funded by NBC saying, go get your guns. And then when someone does, what do? Nothing. They say nothing. It's going to get worse. And it's worrying. I believe this man may have been motivated by depression, and he may have taken it out on, the federal authorities. But when Ocasio-Cortez says never again, which is a reference to World War II Germany, where do you think it goes? Where do you think? So we have a bit of his motivations. We have a bigger update here. They're praising it. The anarchists, the Antifa types, they are praising what just happened. So I guess I'll leave it there. I didn't really want to do another video on this, but it is a huge story, and we did have the update of the statements being put out. So, there you have it. I'll end by saying this. Listen, I have no doubt this video will be deranked, demonetized, and all of that. So if you like it, share it. I mean, what I mean by that is if you think it's important that people hear this, share it, because as I showed you, Vox isn't. It's not there. And look, yes, other outlets may be writing about this. Of course, it exists on other platforms. Like Washington Post was the first one I brought up. It's going to get buried. It's going to be memory hold. And then what? When this gets worse, who will know to call it out? So tell people. Stick around. More videos coming up, youtube.com/TimCastNews starting at 6 p.m. And I will see you all in the next segment.